Juan Soto is this offseason's top free agent, but who's number two? We'll discuss it next. Yes, welcome on into First Pitch for Thursday, November 14th, your source of news, notes, and updates on Major League Baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. Follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. He's Troy Brock, Troy B Baseball on the Twitter machine. And Troy, I want to get to some of the expected trades this offseason and some of the probably surprising trades this offseason. I want to get to what the Los Angeles Angels are doing because some people are saying that they're cooking right now. But first, this is obviously the offseason of Juan Soto, right?
Yeah.
He is one of the, I would say, most desired free agents of the last decade, simply because he's just 26 years old. He's one of the best hitters on the planet, but he's also one of the youngest free agents really in history. It's wild to think he played all of 2024 at age 25. Aaron Judge didn't play his first big league season until he was 25. And, you know, Juan Soto is in a position to get a 14, 15. This could be the longest free agent deal in MLB history.
Yep.
Because he debuted at age 19 and was a star almost immediately. So a lot of stuff here is going to be contingent on what does Juan Soto do, right? We've talked on the show before about, can you build a team around Juan Soto if you have to pay him $45 or $50 million a year? We've talked about how teams could double and triple up on free agents with the money they have put aside for Juan Soto and all of that. But after Juan Soto, who is the top free agent in this free agency class this winter? And I think that's probably a really interesting conversation where I feel like we probably have different ideas.
Yeah, a lot of people like to look at Corbin Burns as probably the second best free agent this offseason. Really, for me, it's probably going to be Blake Snell. And I know that you don't like the walks from Blake Snell, and I don't really like the walks either. But if he lands on a team with a very good infield defense, he strikes out a lot of guys, and he's very good at inducing ground balls. And if he's got a very good infield defense behind him, a lot of those walks, as we saw in San Diego and in San Francisco this year, a lot of those walks will be moot. He'll just get to first base, and then he can turn a double play really whenever he feels the need to.
Yeah, I mean, he won the Cy Young despite having the most walks in baseball, which is wild and kind of goes to your point of he can strike guys out, he can induce weak contact, get ground balls, get double plays and things like that. He did look better on the walks this year once he got into form, right? He was at a 13.3% walk rate in that Cy Young year. You look at this year, he got it down to about 10%. Now, MLB average is 8.2, so it's still above average on walks, but it's still significant as far as improving the real weakness that we identified in his game, or I identified in his game. I do think there is merit to the selection of Blake Snell for this, simply because unlike Corbin Burns, unlike a lot of the other top free agents, he doesn't have a qualifying offer. So you don't have to give up draft pick compensation to sign him. And it could be as significant as not only as 2 picks and international bonus pool money, depending on your status of paying into the CBT, into the luxury tax. I do think also it kind of hurts that the Giants gave up picks to get him just to then promptly lose him after a season. That's always tough. And that's the risk you run when you put player opt-outs and things like that into a contract. Is they gave up a draft pick to get him. They also gave a draft pick to get Matt Chapman. They re-signed Chapman. They lost Snell. Couldn't even give him a qualifying offer, so they can't even get a pick back for him. They couldn't give him a qualifying offer because he already had one in his career. And so just not a good place to be, right, for the Giants. I don't know if I have him as the top free agent, though. It's funny. I can't pick Alex Bregman because we talked shade about him earlier this week. You and I both did. We think that contract's going to age poorly.
Yep.
Corbin Burns does have some red flags, right? This is something, former Cy Young winner. He's been pretty durable. He's pretty young. He was acquired by the Orioles for two top prospects and a competitive balanced draft pick, but they're in a position to get a draft pick back for him. Pitched to a 2.92 ERA and 194 in a third innings. And then to me, the big thing is the longevity for Corbin Burns, right? Going back to 2021, I went back and pulled this. He's top 4 in innings and top 6 in ERA. It's a 2.94 ERA across the last 4 full seasons. And he threw 757 innings.
Wow.
And then this is something where his walk rate was this year second best of his career. His velocity was some of the best of his career. Like his cutter was the highest it's ever been, 95.3 miles an hour this season. So he's throwing harder than he ever had. But there was a little bit of concern. He missed more. He missed less bats than he has before. His strikeout rate was right there around MLB average. Like I think for starters, it's 22%. He was at 23.1. So that came down a little bit. He gave up more contact in the zone. But I do think there's a little bit of tweaks to make here. But to me, one of the biggest things you need if you're signing a top starter is you need a dude who is going to post. He's not going to give opponents easy opportunities by walking a lot of guys and managing contact, like not giving up incredibly hard contact and being okay with that. I understand the weakness of, yes, he has a qualifying offer, but I think the health for him maybe offsets that a bit. So Corbin Burns, to me, I do think it's funny we both have pitchers because it's Juan Soto or bust for a lot of these teams. Outside of Juan Soto, who do you think is the top hitter on the market? Because I think this one is really tough for probably most people to figure out.
Yeah, this one is tough because it is a pretty drastic drop off as far as hitters go after Juan Soto. But I would probably say that the best hitter after Juan Soto is going to be Teoscar Hernandez.
Ooh.
I like Santander, but it could be another case of playing well above his head in a contract year because this is the first time he's ever hit over 40 home runs. And yes, he is a good home run hitter, but he might not be a 40 home run guy. But for me, it is Teoscar Hernandez because he's been really good the past couple of years, and he had to settle for a 1-year show me deal with the Dodgers, and I think he's about to get paid pretty decently this offseason.
Yeah. For me, I think I'm going to go with Willy Adames. This is something he's always been defensively very good. Mm-hmm. And the stats kind of took a step back this year on defense. I think outs above average had him at, which is StatCast, had him at average. But when you go and you look, he had 20 errors this year. 8 of them came in a 3-week span. And so I'm guessing there was some sort of mitigating factor there. Maybe he's playing through a minor injury, something happened or whatever that kind of caused him to have some defensive struggles. But outside of that, I think his defense was, for the most part, good. And so he's one of those few shortstops we've seen hit free agency that we think can stick at shortstop for pretty long. Dansby Swanson's been very good on defense at shortstop. The arm is the question for Dansby. But Xander Bogaerts already got moved off of short to second base. And Trevor Story had the Tommy John, the UCL surgery. And typically position players coming off of UCL end up moving to less challenging defensive positions. So he might be destined for second base sooner than we hope. We've already talked about, I think you and I, maybe on here, maybe not, have talked about Trey Turner eventually having to move to second base or center field because defensively he's just not very good. And he really hasn't been. He kind of has a reputation of being better than he actually is. But you look at Adames, stole 21 bases, only got caught 4 times. He only had 30 steals in his career entering this year. So I don't know if that was just a contract year thing, if that was a rule change thing. They needed him to do it, whatever. But he ran a lot more. And then strikeout rate was the lowest he's ever had. I think it was 25%, which is not amazing, but better than he's ever had. Barrel rate of 12%. League average is like 7.8. He hit 32 home runs. And like over the past 4 seasons, no shortstop has hit more homers than Willy Adames' 112. He's tied with Corey Seager. So you're getting a guy that can hit for power. He showed the ability to run this season. First time he's done that. Again, you may not stick, but and outside of this season, defensive stats have really liked him, and we think there's a mitigating factor this year on that. Now, obviously, qualifying offer, you got to figure out what happens with, you do have to give up a little bit more on him, but he feels better, or I guess he feels a little bit safer at shortstop than I think some of the other guys that have signed have, like Javi Baez, like Trevor Story, like Xander Bogaerts. And so I think you're going to be okay with him. And it's something where he's just 29 as well. So he has that age advantage over a guy like Teoscar Hernandez. A team that hasn't signed any of these guys, but has been pretty busy already in free agency is the Los Angeles Angels. They've made both trades and signings. They traded for Jorge Soler from the Atlanta Braves. They traded for Scott Kingery from your Phillies. And then they've signed both starting pitcher Kyle Hendricks and catcher Travis d'Arnaud. Hendricks from the Cubs, d'Arnaud from the Braves. They doubled down on former Braves by not only bringing in d'Arnaud, but bringing in his catching instructor, Sal Fasano, who was let go by Atlanta. He's now the assistant pitching coach in Los Angeles. And these guys obviously all rejoin Ron Washington, who was third base coach in Atlanta before he left to go to LA. We've talked on this show before, both you and I and you and Christian, about the Royals offseason last year and how they went from a 100-loss team to a postseason team in one offseason. Do we think that the Angels are potentially on a path to do something like this? Or is this we're doing just enough to try to be competitive next year, but not actually changing any of the fundamental issues with our team, which is we're asking Mike Trout to play center field because we have nobody better, and we're still stuck with this awful contract in Anthony Rendon?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be enough. That's the major difference between the Kansas City Royals and what they did last year, and then the Los Angeles Angels and what some may think they're trying to do to replicate the Royals is the Royals division is one of, if not the weakest in baseball between it and the National League Central. Whereas the Angels play in the American League West, which is a pretty tough division when you've got the Houston Astros, the Seattle Mariners, and the Texas Rangers who won the. Go ahead and finish. Sorry, I want to jump in on that real quick. Who won the World Series in 2023?
We always say the AL Central is bad. They had 3 playoff teams this year, and 4 of their 5 teams finished over 500. The Twins were 82 and 80. They just didn't make the postseason because the Tigers rallied. But the Guardians obviously had one of the better records in baseball. They were ahead of bye. The Royals made the postseason. The Tigers made the postseason and advanced on. Like, they beat the Astros and moved on. Is the AL Central really... I wasn't planning on going here, everybody. Is the AL Central really as bad as we think it is? Is this something where just they all beat up on the White Sox?
If you break it down to, because I have looked at this, if you break it down to their record against each other, a lot of their wins have come against each other, especially the White Sox. Now, the Guardians are probably a legitimately good team, and the Royals are probably a legitimately good team. I don't think we're going to see the Tigers make the postseason in 2025. I think that it's going to be a lot like the Astros in 2015 when they made the postseason in 2015 and then missed in 2016 and then came back in 2017. But to the back to the Angels.
Back to the Angels. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. They play in the American League West, and it is a very legitimately tough division because they have shown success against teams outside of their own division. But they're not really making big moves. I think that especially if Mike Trout can stay healthy for the whole year, I think that they can be much better than they were in 2024. But they still have not really, like Kyle Hendricks is not going to bringing in Kyle Hendricks is not going to win you very many games. Now, platooning Travis d'Arnaud and Logan O'Hoppe, that's going to be a pretty strong platoon, because I have seen reports that is what they're planning on doing, and that's going to be a pretty strong platoon as far as catching goes. But what's the rest of your offense going to be like? Because as we talked about, Anthony Rendon is going to play less than 60 games because that's all he wants to play. And he has not been able to stay healthy when he has wanted to play.
And he's not been good when he has played. Yeah,
exactly. And so while they have made moves, they really haven't been that great. I do like the Scott Kingery move. I've been big on Scott Kingery throughout his whole career. I think that the Phillies kind of ruined his mindset by trying to force him into a super utility role that I don't think he was made for. I think that they should have moved off of Cesar Hernandez and put Scott Kingery at second base. But that's just me. We'll see what happens with him in Los Angeles now.
Yeah. And looking at this Angels team, and if we're trying to answer the question of, is this a Royals type of leap next season, it's useful to just go back and forth and compare the teams. And it's like, you have a potential MVP candidate in Mike Trout, just like they have in Bobby Witt Jr. I'd argue Mike Trout, when he's healthy, he can play like that. I don't know if I don't think he's as dynamic with steals anymore as Bobby Witt Jr. was. Zach Neto, injured, expected, might miss the beginning of the season after having surgery. You look at like Vinny Pasquantino versus Nolan Schanuel. I think Pasquantino is much better than Schanuel. They're both similar type of hitters, high contact kind of guys. Going into the season, I had Vinny P as a potential batting title guy, and he underperformed that a little bit. But you have a power source in Jorge Soler, whereas you had like a power guy in Salvador Perez, the young catcher. I do think there's some similarities here, but I think where you kind of lose the thread is the pitching staff. I do think that a lot of Kansas City's moves, they had a young position player core and they brought in quality pitchers. And to your point, Kyle Hendricks is not going to move the needle for the Los Angeles Angels. He pitched to an ERA of almost 6 last year. Right now, your starting pitcher number 5 is Reed Detmers, who had an ERA over 6 last year in 17 starts. And so you haven't made the same caliber of moves. You've just made moves. And without making some sort of large acquisition or meaningful acquisition, I don't necessarily think they're going to be able to get the type of bump in performance that they were looking for. So I think we're in agreement here. They're not quite there yet, right? Where they need to be, or where the moves they have to make to have a Royals type of leap, both because their division's tougher and because their additions have been less impactful so far that we know of. Before we get into the next topic real quick, I want to give a big thanks to our sponsors over at Encase Cards. It's a custom card manufacturer. Encase Cards takes your source photos of whatever it might be. In my case, youth sports. My daughter plays soccer. My son plays t-ball. And their artists personalize it for your child. They select the background. They put on the team name, stats, positions, all that kind of good stuff. Then Encase Cards prints your card on high-quality cardstock. They slab it, and they ship it to you as a keepsake. So check them out, ncasecards.com. That's ncasecards.com. Okay, Troy, we're looking at, there's guys we expect to get moved this offseason, right? Garrett Crochet, we are virtually certain he's going to get traded, right? Yep. The Cardinals have a handful of guys they're discussing trading. Nolan Arenado, Ryan Helsley, things like that. We expect Devin Williams to get traded because they declined his club option to save some money on him in arbitration before he hits free agency. And the way they've done this is a year out of free agency in the offseason. They move these guys. Look at Corbin Burns. What guy I think is going to be the most surprising trade when we stop and we look back at this whole thing on opening day? Like who do we not expect to get moved that is going to get moved?
I only say this because he did play a really big part in their offense, but he was kind of rumored to be moved at the deadline this year. and he did not be. But that is going to be, for me, Ryan Mountcastle of the Baltimore Orioles. He hit 271, 308, 425 this year. Had 13 home runs, but he was a really good piece in the middle of their lineup, and he was a big part of why they were successful with what he did on offense as well as what he did on defense. And with the young core that they do have coming up, and they like O'Hearn over there at first base also, I think that they will wind up moving him. I think it's still going to be surprising, but I do think they'll wind up moving him and bringing in a couple of more prospects that they can develop to be more Gunnar Hendersons.
Yeah, Mountcastle played mostly first base. He's projected from MLB trade rumors to be owed $6.6 million in arbitration, and they have 15 arbitration eligible players, or they did. I don't quite know who they moved on from already, who they've already committed to moving on from. But it does feel like when you have a guy like Kobe Mayo, who is listed as a third baseman, but is really a first baseman, as far as his arm is strong, but his defense isn't great at third. It feels like he's an easy guy to move on from that I don't think we're talking about as a first base guy who can step into a left field role if you need him to cover left field for a game or for a series or something like that. I think that's a really good one. I think the Blue Jays are going to end up moving some guys. We know that the big two they have are Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero Jr. Guerrero had a great year last year. Bichette did not. They've already said they're not going to trade Bichette. And you would think of those two, you would want to re-sign Vlad. But it's entirely possible if they realize this offseason that they're not going to be able to extend him. And you look at kind of the depth of this market after Pete Alonso and Christian Walker. There is not a ton of other incredibly exciting first basemen on the market. Mm-hmm. I could see some team, either a team that trades that signs Soto and doesn't have the money to sign one of those big first basemen, or a team that needs a first baseman desperately and misses out on those two big offers. They could turn around and say, hey, we will throw a giant package at you to get Vlad Guerrero. The Blue Jays understanding that, like, they're not going to be able to extend him. They're probably going to also have to replace Chris Bassett. They won't be able to extend him either. Another guy who's posted, he's 170 innings in the last couple seasons. And they're dealing with a low value right now on Bo Bichette. If they realize that they aren't going to be able to contend with the Yankees, with the Orioles, with maybe the Red Sox, maybe the Rays, wherever they're playing next year, I feel like Vlad could be one of a couple different pieces for Toronto to get moved as they kind of take a step back and say, how can we retool, get some prospects, and try to get back into a tough American League East race. So I find it funny we both kind of went with first baseman here, but I think that's one of those things that's just kind of reflective of the market is at first base feels like it's pretty top heavy. Now, could Anthony Santander maybe play first base? I mean, probably. I think he's played some in the past, but this really kind of feels like it's Christian Walker, Pete Alonso, and then after that, it's just a bunch of, interchangeable pieces that are role player guys that don't really do a lot for you. And so another position that is top heavy but doesn't have has some decent depth. Like maybe you want to go sign Paul Goldschmidt for his age, 53 season, something like that. But it just feels like there's a lot of yellow and red flags in this first base class outside of the top two. And I can see somebody getting desperate and just throwing a bag at the Blue Jays.
Now, that I like that a lot. I like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. being your pick a lot. Do you think that a team like the Houston Astros, who are in pretty big need of a first baseman, have enough to go after Vladimir Guerrero Jr.?
The Astros are really tough because you've got, obviously, Bregman's a free agent. Dana Brown has already kind of hinted that payroll is going to kind of pull back a little bit. And they know that they have to figure out a contract for Kyle Tucker, right? Yeah. So I worry. I think you might see them make a move for a first baseman, but I think it might be somebody like a Yandy Diaz. simply because I think if they understand, I think they understand it's going to be hard to both grab a 1-year guy like Vlad Guerrero Jr. and then also pull back on salary and still compete for and still be competitive and be making a postseason push. Like, I don't think they'll be awful. They're the freaking Astros. But I do think that that's probably not the right financial profile for them if they're giving up assets to get a guy who will be there 1 year when they're not really putting money into pieces around that guy. It feels like they're going to either go with a Yandy Diaz, somebody who is cheaper, right?
Yeah.
Or they're going to end up trying to fill it incredibly cheap for multiple years, right? And I just, as much as I'd love to see, somebody like Vlad do that and have a chance to get out of that division, that doesn't feel super likely to me. I don't know how aggressive the Yankees would be at trying to get another first baseman if they miss out on Soto. I kind of feel like they would want to sign either Walker or Pete to a longer deal than have 1 year of Soto. I'm sorry, 1 year of Vlad. But somebody's going to do it, right? Somebody's going to go get Vlad. I feel like it's just the question is going to be who is it? Maybe it's the Mets, and they sign him as one of the stars, to, first base, and leave Mark Vientos at third. So we'll kind of see what happens there. Getting in quick pitch, there's a couple little fun things I want to kind of mention. The first one is Bobby Witt Jr. is getting married. Obviously, the probably MVP runner-up in the American League, Aaron Judge, and he had a really interesting way of announcing or inviting his groomsmen to be part of the party because he partnered with Topps to print custom slabbed and PSA graded trading cards that he mailed to these different guys. MJ Melendez, AJ Smith-Shawver of the Braves. They played together in high school at Colleyville High School in Texas. So is this one, how cool is this? And two, do you think non-Bobby Witt baseball players could also get this deal with Topps, or is this dude's one of the biggest stars in baseball? We're going to make this happen for him.
Yeah, this is cool as hell. I mean, this is one of the coolest wedding invitations I've ever seen. But I think this is a one and done Bobby Witt Jr. type of thing, just because of how high profile he is. Topps made a good business decision because it's going to be everywhere. Just the pictures of it and everything, and just the publicity that Topps is, which not that they need it because it's Topps, but still they're going to get a lot of publicity from it. And I do think it's a one and done Bobby Witt Jr. type of thing, especially because your wife's not going to be too happy about it if she sees Bobby Witt Jr. did it. You're just copying Bobby Witt Jr. So,
but you got to be original somehow, yeah.
Right, exactly. But it's a pretty cool thing for sure.
Maybe if you can't get it done with Topps because it's Bobby Witt Jr. only, maybe you call Encase Cards and they make you custom and slabbed cards and they mail them out for your wedding party. There's an idea for you. NCASCcards.com. Check them out.
Tell them First Pitch sent you.
There you go. The other thing is Roki Sasaki. There's been a lot of conversation about one, everybody thinks he's destined to the Dodgers because just come on. But then two, about he should be considered the top non-Juan Soto free agent. This is something, it's obvious he's going to be probably the number one prospect as soon as he signs, right?
Yeah.
But do we think he should be considered on the same tier immediately as a guy like Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who came in and could have been the number one pitcher for the Dodgers right away? Or should we, because he's only 23 years old, dealt with a little bit of injury stuff last year and, loss of fastball velocity and stuff, should we think of him more like a traditional prospect than thinking of him as a no doubt major leaguer on opening day that you could have in, pitching that first series of the year?
Yeah, I think that he's more of a prospect, especially at his age. He's 23. I'm with you on that. And for me, a lot, even the older guys when they come over, like Yoshinobu Yamamoto, I think that the thought behind them is they've had so much success at the NPB level that people forget that the level of competition at Major League Baseball is a lot tougher than the level of competition at MPB, and it's much more of a grind. And yes, those guys had a lot of success, but you see them come over here, and like Yamamoto, he got hurt. He had a good season, but he got hurt. Kodai Senga, when he has pitched, he's been pretty good, but he's been pretty hurt also. Shohei Ohtani, when he has pitched, he's been pretty good, but he hasn't pitched much because he's been hurt. And so that's another thing that you have to consider with these guys. But yeah, I think he's more of a prospect than a surefire number one pitcher right now.
Yeah, I mean, these are the kind of things where, like, the ball is different. Like, it's a different baseball.
Yeah.
Obviously, the hitters are a different level. The power is a much bigger part of the game in the States than it is in Japan, right? A lot of Japanese hitters are more contact hitters than power hitters. There's a lot more bunting, sacrifices, things like that. Whereas here, obviously, you're hitting a lot of home runs and stuff like that.
Yep.
It does, like, for context here, Yamamoto, the most home runs he allowed in a standard season in Japan, not the minors, but in the majors, was in 2021. He allowed 7 homers in 193 and 2/3 innings. He allowed 7 homers in 90 innings for the Dodgers last year.
Wow.
You know, an ERA of 3 was higher than any year but higher than any of his standard NPB years. He had some minor league time, but higher than any of his standard NPB years. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if he is up relatively quickly with whoever signs him. And again, we all think it's going to be the Dodgers, but I do think he's probably more of a prospect than people realize, simply because you've got to make sure he's healthy. And then you have to keep him healthy because the workload is different in the States. The pitching routine, you don't just pitch once a week. The traditional MLB thing is you pitch every 5 days, not once a week. The Dodgers did a lot of work to try to keep Yamamoto on that once a week kind of routine. If they get Sasaki, you're in essence going to have to carry a 6 starter. And I think we should have a conversation on the show one day about, does MLB eventually change the rules and allow you to carry 6 starters? Expand the roster size by 1 and give you 6 starters and let everybody have a 6-man rotation versus a 5. I think that's a conversation we probably should have at some point in time.
Oh yeah.
But that's a different show. This has been First Pitch for Thursday, November 14th. If you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, then also leave us a 5-star review. And remember, we need words of affirmation here on First Pitch. Until next time, this has been First Pitch.